Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to welcome all of you for another MEMO conversation. Today, we are going to discuss geopolitics and soft power in the age of COVID-19. My name is Elif and I'm a journalist, as you know. Today, we are going to host Dr. Omar Salha. Welcome, Omar.
Hi, welcome, Elif.
Hi. He is lecturer in international diplomacy and soft power. He is also founder and chief executive Ramadan Tent Project in the UK. So Omar has worked with and consulted several community projects, NGOs, for the past 15 years, especially about interfaith dialogue, community cohesion, public diplomacy, soft power, sports diplomacy as well. So therefore, we will discuss how COVID-19 affects international relations and soft power. So first of all, Omar, as you know, the virus has made foreign aid a more public tool. So now we have new diplomacy terms such as mask diplomacy, COVID diplomacy, pandemic diplomacy, and now vaccine diplomacy. So can you please explain what is soft power in the age of COVID-19? And can we say that those new terms like vaccine diplomacy, pandemic diplomacy, they are also part of soft power? Can we say that?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much, Elif, and to your team and to everyone at MEMO for the kind invitation. It's a very pertinent topic to discuss, especially in this current climate. And of course, I think for the foreseeable future, to look back at how geopolitics has changed, has evolved pre-COVID, during COVID-19, and of course, hopefully we'll be able to look back post the pandemic once we go back to some form of normalcy. But as you have mentioned, there are several terminologies that we have come to be a bit more familiar with in the past months. And at the essence of it all is obviously the key terminology here, soft power. So for us to begin, what is soft power? And soft power ultimately is the attraction to a particular idea, to the other, to a particular space or way of thinking, or a brand or a nation, and the ability to actually attract the other to do what you want them to do without the use of force, so through non-coercive means. And soft power was first coined by the American academic Joseph Nye in the early 90s. And the focus on this was actually in definition against or parallel to hard power. And hard power being the concept of getting the other party to do what you wanted to do, but through coercive means, so through the use of force. And so hard power is through military direct intervention, through military force, through military intervention, through wars, through conflict, through armed conflict. And soft power is actually the complete opposite. It is the ability to do so through non-coercive means. However, the two actually work in conjunction with the other. As we look throughout history, following interventions, following armed conflict, there is always a move towards soft power policies to ensure the smoothing over of relations between two or more nation states. And so soft power has actually in effect been around before the 1990s, before it was first coined and termed by the American academic Joseph Nye. And we can look at French philosophers like Pierre Bourdieu, for instance, who looked at the use of symbolic power and the power of symbolism and the power of social capital, the ability to reach or attain a certain capital within one's own agency, but then able to then impose that recognition that they have achieved onto others. And that is a form of this idea of persuasion that we speak about, in this space, an area of negotiation and persuasion through non-coercive means. So that, in a short summary, is what soft power is, and it's something which many nation states have accommodated and used as part of their foreign policy objectives, speaking to foreign nationals directly, or speaking to foreign governments. The increase of non-governmental actors, NGOs, non-state actors, the introduction of an influx of humanitarian organizations stepping in to try to bridge the gap between governments and also those around the world. So soft power actually is almost the theory, if it were, that when we come to practice it and put it into actual physical understanding, something more tangible than just the theory that we read, can be translated into public diplomacy. So again, a form of diplomacy where a nation state will speak to a foreign public. And so particularly now more than ever, of course, geopolitics revolves around particular isolated areas that it may appear to be so, but actually are very much interlinked. And of course, with COVID now, we've seen the role of nation states, behaviors, attitudes have changed as a result of this challenge that we have all faced around the globe. So with that said, of course, soft power inevitably is one of the most talked about topics currently now in international relations, as a result of the fact that it has impacted a nation's soft power as a result of COVID-19, as a result of the response countries have made or have improved their public image, or maybe have not.
Mm-hmm. I see. So you mentioned about the changings. What are those changes in the age of COVID-19? Can you please open a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think it's quite important to note that at the top of the 2020 year, Brand Finance had published a global soft power index in February 2020. I was there at the launch, speaking alongside Lord Sebastian Coe and Ban Ki-moon, the former UN General Secretary, was there as well. And the conversation was revolving around the need for us to create more solidarity and understanding and cohesion, and almost a global humanitarian effort to bring mutual understanding with one another, and actually utilizing soft power as a means of doing that, to create actually allyship between more nations. Mm-hmm. And what I refer to here is in terms of changes of attitudes and behavior. What we found was actually, up until one of the first sort of influx of cases we saw in Europe and here in Britain, what we found very interesting is the retraction from a more sort of global narrative. What we found is actually countries were closing up its own borders. What we found is that countries were focusing more in-house and obviously looking inward as opposed to looking outward. And so of course, with COVID-19 and obviously a pandemic, it presents its challenges. And I think some countries were very, very quick to actually cut off from the outer world. And I think with diplomacy and soft power in particular, if your efforts are to actually try to gain some sort of attraction and increase your public diplomacy efforts with other countries,
sure, then
for sure you will be looked at your actions. And I think several countries, for instance, you look at Germany, you look at Britain in terms of trading, exports, particularly PPE equipment, for instance, from Britain going out. There was an increase of sort of trade from PPE equipment going from Britain and being exported, as opposed to there was a need in the UK, for instance. Germany were very, very quick to react and also cut off any movement of people coming in and out of the borders. And we actually see the flip side, where some nation states actually took this as an advantage to actually empower itself in terms of its soft power image. So for instance, China early on intervened in Italy with humanitarian assistance, sending doctors as well from China to assist in the early stages of March and April with the increasing numbers of COVID cases that were taking place in northern Italy. So something like that obviously would give an understanding and insight into how a nation's brand and its ability to exercise and flex its muscle of public diplomacy was able to actually increase its soft power. And what you see is with data now, you see actually a lot of the Italians surveyed actually found that they have a much more favorable image towards China than its European neighbors because of its intervention in March, April. So these are some of the attitudes and challenges, and obviously the change of behavior that we see. So I think it's incredibly vital that we do not take soft power for granted, because clearly we see a European neighbor like Italy, for instance. It feels actually that France and Germany and even the UK are less favorable and almost seen as more of the enemy, quote unquote, than China because of its intervention that it made.
Amazing. Wow. Perfect examples, really. They are very current. We have been wondering how chess diplomacy, for example, or how panda diplomacy collaborated, how did they create those kind of terms? Now you really beautifully explain how vaccine diplomacy happened, and we witnessed that since since last March. We have been witnessing vaccine diplomacy or COVID diplomacy. Really perfect examples. Now I want you to mention a little bit, especially it is very important for young generations, digital transformation, digital diplomacy. As you know, there is a huge digital transformation right now because of the COVID-19. Universities, businesses, even some hospitals convert their systems into powerful digital format. So that's incredible. And people are working from home. Even some leaders for example, they join G20, as far as I remember, from their home office. Leaders join intergovernmental meetings from their home office. And my question is, how does COVID-19 affect international relations and diplomacy in terms of digitalization? And in the near future, how this situation affect normal people like us?
It's an excellent question, and I think it's one of the evolutions of diplomacy that we find quite interesting is obviously the digital age. And I think if we look at traditional state-centered, or what we like to call track one diplomacy, which is pretty much focusing on foreign ministries with other, or the host nation states, with the foreign office of the states, or embassies and consulates and ambassadors and diplomats, as a very much sort of track one element of diplomacy, where actually what we're seeing now is evolution of that. So track two diplomacy is looking at foreign nations speaking to other foreign publics en masse, and that is again facilitated through the use of digital technology. The digital age, merely what has it done, has actually facilitated the opportunity to allow to connect with more people. And so if your instruction as a diplomat, as an ambassador, is primarily to do that, then you would openly accept this evolution of digital diplomacy, because it actually facilitates the very objectives that ambassador and diplomat will need to do. So actually hearing the local voice, and sometimes we speak about bringing a voice to the voiceless, for those who do not have the platform to actually air some of their concerns or grievances, or even just that cultural exchange that you look for. So in addition to the in-person meetings, and of course the festivals, the events that we attend as part of public diplomacy, actually what we see is the digital transformation has allowed us to connect with millions around the globe from the very comfort of our homes. And so COVID-19 and the pandemic has almost fast-tracked that element of our connection and exchange when it comes to diplomacy. And not just only diplomacy, but of course the way we work, the way we live, the way we live, and the way we socialize as a community. So that's how it's trickled down to, let's say, the average person, the ordinary person, in terms of how they react and how they actually are able to live their lives in a new age of working under COVID-19. But in relation to COVID-19 in particular, and of course the more global narratives around us versus them, and of course this idea of transcending these boundaries and borders that we spoke about in early February of 2020 at the summit, what we find very interesting is the idea of these vaccinations now coming to the surface. Of course, we have now China, we have now Britain, we have also the US and Russia. So all of them at the forefront of a race to find the most effective vaccine. And so I just want to reiterate this important point here, where we found, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, the German ambassador to the UK had actually tweeted something, again, as an ambassador, so make note of the communication and language we're using, that the German ambassador to the UK utilized Twitter as a platform to make his point across by actually saying that the vaccine, Britain being the first country in the world to use the vaccine, and the first woman, the first person on the planet to actually be given the COVID-19 vaccine, was in the UK, a 91-year-old woman. And so it was very interesting that that vaccine was termed as a British vaccine, whereas there's nothing British about the components or the ingredients that make up of the vaccine. And so it was heralded as a British milestone, as a milestone for Britain being the first country in the world to trial this vaccine. And actually, in response, the German ambassador took initiative, because again, this was the Pfizer BioNTech vaccination. So of course, not British in that sense, but actually a conglomerate of 2 or more countries who were involved in this production of the vaccine. And the response by the ambassador was to say, well, actually, this is not just a British vaccine, but actually an effort of more than one nation coming together. And I think the point was, could we not just emphasize the importance of now a global community around our struggle to try and overcome COVID-19 in this particular area, without having it to become political and actually go back to sort of nation borders, almost jurisdiction around which vaccine is cheaper or which vaccine is more effective. And this actually feeds back into the early signs we saw when we were faced with COVID-19, and also all nations trying to cope with it, was that they looked inward. And so my fear is that whilst soft power is an incredibly important tool of attraction to others, I think it's also an important understanding to utilize this sense of soft power, particularly during these difficult times, to try and create better understanding, better mutual exchange, benefit of exchange, to come out of all of this together, as opposed to having almost a race to become the best nation, or a race to put together the rankings of the best countries who survived with COVID-19, because this has affected everyone. And so, unfortunately, that narrative that came out last week, there was a backlash or a pushback by the German ambassador, which actually was proved to be a viral tweet, which many people followed and quite liked. And I think that actually pictured for me a very, very simple and actually articulate way of how this vaccine could potentially turn into sort of a war of more than one country online, through trying to become the #1 ranking country that has come out of the COVID-19.
And as you know, also, first woman, yes, she's British, and first man also, he's British, and his name is William Shakespeare. So do you think that is that combination of cultural diplomacy and humanitarian vaccine diplomacy?
But yeah, I mean, I think, look, what will happen is, of course, these stories will come out into the media. They're very, very, great stories. And we obviously hope that these vaccines will actually be true to what they are, in the sense that we all do come out of this safer, and obviously be able to return some sort of normalcy. But I think it's inevitable that the media spin, if you can say, or I think, and this is one of the main pillars of soft power again, is that the use of media, the use of culture, heritage and tourism, business and trade, all of these certainly will all play a factor into the attraction to a country. And I think certainly, I mean, the British man that you refer to, who had this interview with the CNN just after his vaccination. So CNN, and again, an American news station, interviewing a British citizen who's just had the vaccine as well. That also, feeds into the point of actual, in effect, a non-state form of public diplomacy, right? Talking about how the British now are the very first in the world to be having this vaccine. But my fear is, although these success stories, they must remain grounded and rooted in terms of the wider struggle and the wider position that we all world leaders will have to have in trying to face this COVID-19 pandemic. And because with every challenge we have seen in world politics and international relations, there are those who stand beside you who are allies, and there are those who are standing beside you with interests. who want to engage. So I think it's very, very important that we actually see this played out with the next 6 months, let's say, how this will turn out. And already we've seen obviously ongoing conversations that are taking place at the moment with Brexit and Britain and the EU deal, whether they will come to a deal or not. So there's a lot of things happening around, not just primarily with COVID-19, but I think in a way COVID-19, what it has done in this pandemic is almost maybe shown light to certain areas that we may have not taken as much focus on beforehand. So what has it done in effect is actually maybe uncover certain realities when it comes to dealing with public diplomacy and soft power in general.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you purely give good examples, of course, but I want to ask that question because I think we need a good explanation in terms of globalization, especially Trump's withdrawal from Paris Climate Agreement, from some United Nations departments. So do you think that you perfectly give examples, by the way, but I just want to ask you, do you think that pandemic will end globalization? And beyond that question, does this pandemic have any, even small, any potential to create more nation states?
Well, it's almost like the barometer of understanding where we are in the world when it comes to our global understanding of diplomacy and how we actually react to this understanding of a global communal effort. So I think the idea that we looking at utilizing soft power as a means of creating that mutual exchange, understanding, negotiation, representation, and presentation of one another. But for sure, I mean, what we have seen is, of course, the way nations have reacted, the way leaders have reacted under COVID-19, of course, will certainly has, and we have seen this in direct effect. What does it mean in terms of policy? So, of course, the World Health Organization, we found out very clear. Obviously, the President the Trump administration had actually pulled funding from the WHO because of fear that the Chinese were meddling into the politics of WHO and trying to influence WHO. So, of course, we saw cutback of funding and finances there. Elsewhere, the Paris climate change deal as well. Of course, the Americans pulled back on that as well. Elsewhere, we have seen recently, a couple of weeks ago, Britain cutting its foreign aid budget as well. So, and of course, that has meant several charities and chief execs in the charity world and the third sector coming out and saying this will inevitably cause up to 100,000 deaths of young children. Already we are seeing in Yemen, 80% of the population in Yemen is is deemed in need of humanitarian assistance. So, of course, we're talking about some of the cases here in terms of Britain and US and obviously the politics of China and Europe and the US. However, the reality is on the ground, there'll be millions who will be suffering because of COVID-19, irrespective of the politics. But of course, now because of the cuts in budgets and aid, we will see more people at risk of potentially dying or not be able to actually see the end of the year or beyond that. And so I think it's very, very important that, again, some of the important traits of understanding of the pillars of soft power is looking at how our country is responding in terms of its humanitarianism, its humanitarian response. Already we're seeing with Joe Biden, President-elect Joe Biden, saying that he will actually reverse the almost pulling the plug on the Paris deal. So he'll come back on that, on the climate change. We're seeing that there will be funds reinstated in, let's say, UNRWA, for example, and WHO to be supported as well. So that is a much more sort of progressive, open-armed approach towards actually dealing with the pandemic, and actually re-emphasizing that point is quite incredibly important, particularly in this day and age. But what we have seen again is, for instance, just very recently, 2 weeks ago, you know, the Chancellor of the Exchequer here in Britain, Rishi Sunak, announcing that he will be cutting back on foreign aid. Almost goes back to the, well, not almost, but actually directly goes back to the narrative that we were referring to, which is related to some extent the vaccine, the British vaccine, and also early in March and April, where countries were now looking inwards. And my fear is that COVID-19 has actually forced countries to actually now start looking inward as opposed to sending out humanitarian assistance, because now more than ever there is a growing need of humanitarian assistance around the world. And this is the thing about the narrative needs to be about taking it back to our understanding of a global community, of a community that of the world that has actually faced one of the most difficult years ever. And I think those who are in lesser developed countries, economically speaking, will now will be at the most risk, the highest risk of the impacts of unemployment, of death, of malnutrition, of poverty. And these are some of the key areas that actually we are seeing, in some cases, countries taking a much more proactive approach to try and deal with maybe increasing its soft power attraction through humanitarian efforts as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's perfect explanation and very inclusive. I think now, I think it's enough really how pandemic affects international relations and soft power. If you don't have any further remarks, we can close that conversation. Thank you for joining us, Omar. Do you have any remarks? Do you want to add anything?
No, just basically the point that our sense of understanding in terms of soft power and its effects and impacts really needs to transcend nation borders. And I think it's very important that when we look at our own understanding of identities, that we have cultural affiliations to a particular place and area, but actually what COVID-19 has actually shown us, that there needs to be a united front where people are coming to the fore to actually help the needy and help those who are in sincere need. But of course, what we have seen is also there is the politics of this. So I mean, one of the key examples that I saw as well is the Turkish government sending aid and PPE masks and equipment to the UK, for example. And it was very a nice, befitting touch. There was a quote from Rumi. So I think that was a very nice, eloquent way, an articulate way of actually talking about humanitarian assistance and need to support. And I think the urgency right now is with soft power. Needs to be less about winning hearts and minds, but actually helping those hearts and minds to survive. I think that's the most important thing. And I think when we look at the policy implications of governments when it comes to global diplomacy and digital diplomacy, yes, it's about creating a favorable image of that nation, but I think the ulterior motive here should not be only about that, but actually should be about not only nation interests, but the interest of being human-centric and placing value on human dignity in order for us to utilize this difficult period to come and join our resources and forces together to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much. You give good example, very metaphoric example by the help of Rumi, by the way. Really, I like it. And I'm sure that our audience like it because this pandemic, really, it is very universal. So as a human being, everything is universal, you know, even sickness, illness, universal. It's a good lesson for us. Not only football, for example, a championship league or any other thing. Also, illness, sickness is universal. So it was a good lecture from the nature and from the world for us. So thank you, Omar. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elif. Appreciate it.
It was fabulous. And I'm very delighted to host you today. And yes, today we have discussed how pandemic affect international relations and soft power. Thank you for joining us and kind regards from London. See you next time.